Welcome to another episode of Cyber Secrets.
The firmware is set up in two sections. There's a section on the PCB board, which is the base code that tells the system how to boot, and then the rest of the code, or the larger portion of the firmware, is going to be in the SA or system area on the platter. This tells the system how to read the data on the drive. On the PCB board, if you get a click of death, this could be caused because it doesn't know how to get to the SA. If it's on the platter, it's because it can't read the SA. So what does this mean for you? Well, the click of death can be a symptom of multiple things, such as corrupt firmware on the PCB or the SA, scratched platters, damaged heads, or a preamp failure. How do you fix it? Well, for number one, PCB swap. Or if that doesn't, could be potentially firmware upgrade. There's also a head stack replacement. That would be a hardware fix for damaged heads and a failing preamp.
This is a mobile clean room that I'll be using for the rest of the demonstration. It's from SAS, or Sentry Air Systems. Now that we're in our clean room, I'll explain a few things. We have screwdrivers on the right-hand side, we have tweezers, we even have finger cots. The finger cots are going to prevent the fingerprints from getting on the platter, because once you do, grime and gunk is going to get caught in those fingerprints, or the oils from your fingerprints, and potentially destroy the drive. On the left-hand side, we have an actuator remover, and on the top, we have the multiple platter remover, because we don't know what's going to be inside these drives specifically. On the bottom right-hand side, we have pieces of paper. These pieces of paper are going to be used if there's multiple heads, or multiple platters. This will keep the heads from touching, because if the heads touch, it's going to destroy the heads, and you have to have another donor. So at this point, I wanted to show you 160 gig drive on one, 160 gig on the other. We want the donor and the source to be as close together as possible, such as the make and model number. You also want the manufacturer, the same plant. You also want the same head stack assembly. You also want the same memory if there is going to be memory inside the drive. With that being said, once we have everything as identical as possible, head stacks, you do need identical. Firmware, you're going to need identical if you don't have a PC3000. So now that we have everything as close together as possible, let's get started. Again, just as a reminder, you need to have everything as close together as possible. So, the first thing you're going to have to do, now that everything's matched, because it's click of death, we're going to open up the drive. So this unfortunately takes a little bit of time. With that said, it's a really good idea to make sure that you're as anal retentive as possible on where you put the screws. Some people even get a piece of cardboard, they'll draw out the drive, and then they'll put the screws in holes related to where they would be in a real drive. Some people will even use a pillbox whenever doing this. But either way, you need to take off the screws so you can get the faceplate off. Now that we have the screws off, we want to make sure that there's no more screws underneath. This one just happens to have one underneath the circle, right around the circle. So we're going to tear that piece of sticker off. Once we get to it, we'll take that screw out, and that should allow us to take off the cover. And just remember, because they're the same on both sides, you're going to have to do the exact same thing on the other drive before you can open up the faceplate. So once we take out this screw, we should be able to remove the faceplate without a problem. As you can see, again, we are in a clean room, so it's going to minimize the debris that's going through. Putting the faceplate up above to get it out of our way. And now, I'm going to go through a few things. As you can see the head, there's a drive ramp. Right here, this is going to be the IC, or the internal circuit board. I usually unscrew those two specific screws and then remove the IC out of the way so it gives you more real estate to work with. If you have really small hands and if you're comfortable with it, you may not need to, but it makes it a lot easier for most people. So once we remove that out of the way, we should have direct access to where the heads are. Just put it to the side. And now you have a lot more room. So again, we're going to do the same thing with the other drive. This takes a lot of time, so we're going to fast forward through it. Now, both faceplates are off. We're going to do the same thing with this internal circuit board. Once we remove it, put it to the side just like on the one on the left. And basically what we're going to do is take the heads from the donor on the left and then put them to the source on the right. This is the one that we want to recover the data from. If you look really closely, you can see this only has half a head. So it's only writing to one side of the platter, the bottom side. This makes the head swap a lot easier. If there's multiple heads, it makes it a little bit more difficult. But to get to the heads, we're going to have to remove the magnet on top. So we take the screws out. Not all of the magnets do have screw pairs. This one does. Once we do that, we're going to then get the magnet or the hammer, the actuator remover, put it on, and then pull that top magnet directly off. Now we have direct access to the heads. Without doing this, you're not going to be able to get the heads out. As you notice, it is on a drive ramp, so you don't really have to worry about the platter that much. There's also a lock. We just took that lock out, and that lock keeps the heads from falling off the platter. But since this only has half a head, it's not really going to matter that much. So you can see, if it did have a head pair, I'd have to separate them somehow, and that's what the paper at the bottom right-hand side would have been for. But since there's not, we're just going to go and take it out. Move straight up off that post where the original screw is holding into. Just to show you again, it only has one head, so you don't have to worry about two heads touching each other. So this is actually a relatively easy head swap. And we're going to do the same thing with the other drive. So in the end, after we take the actuator off, for the top half of the actuator, we're going to remove the whole head stack, which includes the head stack, the voice coil, the ribbon cable, and the IC, and put it directly into the one we're trying to repair. So again, once the actuator, or the half of the actuator is off, we just pick straight up. Right after we take out the pin. Now there's nothing impeding it. Move straight up and move straight over to the other drive. And the biggest trick here is to make sure that the head or the very tip of the head does not get locked up on the drive ramp. So we're barely pushing it down a little bit, making sure it gets in the proper guide. Once it does get put in place, we put the locking mechanism back in, as that's going to prevent the heads from falling off the drive ramp, and then gently slide it on the platter, make sure that there's no impedance. Put the IC back in, and then put everything back together. And again, this does take time, so we're going to fast forward. Now that we have the drive that was bad, we just did a head swap, should be able to go directly to another system, plug it in, and it's probably going to work.
The Cyber Secrets web series covers computer forensics, hacking, and everything in between.
Thank you
you for your continued support of Cyber Secrets. With the reboot of the different series, we want to ask if you have ideas for future content or suggestions for improvement. Please let us know. Click subscribe for new episodes of Cyber Secrets.